Welcome to November 2024 office hour. So last time we looked at different types of lease, and so I thought this time why don't we just go through the mass lease, mass functionality. So mass lease, mass close, mass modification to introduce the termination option, and mass casualty. Let's start with mass lease end. So it allows performing the lease end process for a large number of selected items. Lease ends can only be triggered for activation groups where all the monthly transactions like payment, accrual, depreciation have been posted under all applicable accounting standard. The lease end batch action transitions activation group from active status to lease end status, and this action is available in the workflow transition. So to access it, we can go to the main menu and then select the batch management, and then we need to create a batch, and then under the drop down we can select workflow mass transition. Since the lease end is performed in the activation group level, we need to select activation group as the target level, and then we can give it a name and then save it. Once we save it, we will be able to go to the next tab, which is the actions. And then we can select lease end, that is to transition from active to lease end. And then again, we can save it, and then we can go to the filters. Filters are same as other batch types, so allowing for large or target selection. We can select all contracts under specific company, lease area also, or we can select specific contracts. And once we selected the filters, we can save it, and then we can click on the generate the items. Once we generate the items, we can go to the batch items and see the list of the items that are ready for lease end. So once we generate it, and once the status is done, it will show us the list of all the contracts that we selected over here, and to see if they are actually ready for lease end. That means if all the transactions have been posted. And then we can click on the run. Once the status is done, we can go to the batch items to see to make sure the job status is done and complete. And then we can go to the individual contract to see if the status has changed to lease end. So once it shows as done, we can go to the activation group, and here we can see the activation group status has changed to lease end from active. Do anyone have any question? Nope. Okay, let's move on to mass close. So mass close allows performing the close process for a large selection of items like mass lease end. This function is available in batch type workflow transition, and it transition activation group from lease end to close. So one thing to note is the close can only be triggered if the activation group is already in lease end status. Again, to access it, we can go to the main menu, click on batch management, and then we can create a batch and select workflow mass transition from the drop down. Again, since the close is done in the activation group level, we need to select activation group as the target level, and then type the batch name, and we can save it. And then we can go to the action tab, and we can select close to transition from lease end to closing. Then we have the filters. We can similar to what we had for mass lease end. We can select the batches, allowing for large or target selection. For example, if you want to close the contracts in one particular company, one lease area, or based on the cost center, you can select it as per here. Otherwise, we can select bulk contract or activation group or master lease agreement and select the contracts or master lease agreement. If you want to select specific contracts or master lease agreement, you can just type in all those contracts with comma over here. And then we can save it, and then we can go to the input tab. We can add the end date, the posting date, and document date. And again, we can click on save. So here, end date is just for the record. It doesn't have any financial impact. And then we can proceed with the workflow. We can generate the items. So once we save it, this grayed out button will be activated and it will turn blue. And once it's turned blue, we can click on it and generate the items. Once we generate the items over here, we can see if see the list of the contracts that we selected, and to see if the job status is ready. That means if those activation groups are ready for close. And once we check that, we can go and run the process. Once the job status is changed to done, that means the process has been completed. And then we can go to the individual activation group and make sure the status has changed to close. Any question regarding lease and close? Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I was in a mute.
Oh.
So I think Pratibha, we should also see, right, that these AGs, right, which are
Mhm.
not in a lease and status for some reason, like in a draft status, or
Mhm.
those will be ignored,
Yes.
right?
So anything that's not in the lease and status will be ignored from the
Right.
list.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to mass modification. So we can add a termination option uh, to a large number of contracts using the mass lease modification. So mass lease modification allows us to perform modification on multiple contracts at once. Lease modification that can be applied includes extensions, supplements, reductions, and even adding a termination option. To do a mass lease modification, we can go to the main menu. First, click on the import export information, and we can select mass lease modification. In the new window, we can download the data, a template, or upload the file. So once we select download data file, we can select the filters for downloading existing data. It can be a large selection, example, the contract from single company, lease area, or we can select specific contracts of or activation group. And then we submit it, and we will be able to download the data file. And once in the exported file, we already have all the pre-filled details that we can modify and complete based on our requirement. So this particular file has 4 tabs: contract change, lease component modification, non-lease amount distribution, and activation group modification. So in the first tab, that is the contract change tab, we can add the amendment date. We have the details for MLA, contract ID, all those, and the contract rate too. We can change we can punch in the amendment date. Again, this does not have any financial impact, and it's just for the record. And then we can select the recent code. Pardon? Okay. We can select the recent code 70. 70 is to add a new term. And then we can type in the description, adding a termination option, but this is optional. We can also change the contract rate if required, when that is optional. And then we have the second tab, which is the lease component modification tab. We can fill in the details to add a termination term. We can give a new term, object ID, and we can add the category. So 07 is for lease end. And then we can add the term type 92. 92 is for termination. And the name is optional. We can enter the penalty amount or we can keep it as 0. And then we can fill in the dates and all these details. If you have like for example, if you have any non-lease amounts, we can complete the third tab with the non-lease amount distribution. But if you don't have it, that particular tab is optional. And then we can move on to our last tab. So activation group modification tab. We can excise the terms, add effective date, posting date, and documents date over here. So to excise it, we keep it as Y for yes and N for no. And once we complete the template, we can go back to the UI and upload the file. If there are no errors, the modification will be successful and the modification will be successful and the terms will be added to the contract. Do you have any question? Any comments? Okay. Now let's move on to mass casualty. So casualty means a sudden, unexpected, or unusual loss of damage to the leased asset that will require the retirement of the asset and termination of the lease contract. This is performed at the activation group level, and it will retire all the contracts, all the assets that are targeted. And users may, like for example, if you need to retire only certain asset from the activation group, you can split the activation group into two and have one activation group where you with all the asset that needs to be retired, and then you can retire that activation group. Before completing the casualty event or asset depreciation posting, up to the effective date must be posted, as it will no longer be possible after the asset is retired. So to do a mass casualty, we can go to the main menu, batch management, and then create a batch, and then select mass casualty from the drop down. And we will reach the definition page. And since the transition is done in the activation group, we need to select activation group as the target level, and we name it and save it. Then we can go to the actions tab, and we have the mass casualty already selected. So we can go to the filters, and similar to what we saw for mass lease and mass close, we can select large or target selection. For example, contract from particular company, lease area, etc. Or we can select specific items like contact, activation group, and then we can select the object. And then we can save it and go to input tab. In the input, user will be able to select the payment date, posting date, and document date, as well as we can indicate whether to use default casualty amount, or if you have a penalty amount, you can type them down over here. And then we can save it. And once we save it, the generate button will be activated. We can generate it and run. The casualty will be applied to all the selected contacts. Do anyone have any question? Nope. Okay, let's go to the UI and let's see these in the user interface. Yep. So we have our NLA open now. So to do first, let's start with our mass lease end. We can go to the main menu. We can select batch management, and then we can create a batch. Under batch type, we can select mass casualty, and we can submit them. So again, target level is activation group. Oh, sorry. Batch management, workflow mass transition, and we can submit them. The target level, since we have to do mass lease and it's done under activation groups level, so we can select the activation group and save it. Oh, already selected. And then we can give it give a batch name. Enter and save it. And then we can go to Actions tab, and we can select Lease End, active to lease end, and I can save it. And the filters tab will be activated. We can go and select if you want the transition to be for a particular company, system, or lease area, you can do so over here. You can select the system disconnected. You can select lease area, or if you want it for particular company, you can select the company. Or we can go to the filter, bulk contract, and select the list of contracts from here. So I can select P10. Okay, selected 2, and I can confirm. And once we selected the contract, we can save it. And the generate button is activated now. I can go and generate items. So if the status is generating, so in those the contracts that I chose, we don't have contracts that are either not maybe the postings were not done, or it's not ready for the mass lease end. So we can select few others. Six. Let's try these two. And I can save it, and I can generate item. So it's generating, and it says ready. Once the status has changed to ready, we can go to the batched item. And here we can see 2 activation groups that are ready for lease end. And once we can go to the activation group here and see if it's actually ready um, for lease end. So the lease end button is activated over here. So yes. And we can go and run individually, or by mass, we can run it together. And it's done. Once it's done, the job status changes to done, and then we can go to the activation group level to see if it's actually transitioned to lease end. So it has transitioned to lease end. Yes. Do anyone have any question?
I think one thing, Pratibha, we should tell them that this will only work if the payment date is same for all the contract, right? Otherwise, those payment date,
Yes.
those contract will not be picked up.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, now moving on to mass close. We can again copy this particular batch. I can continue them, and I can name it enter, and save it. And then I can go to action, and from lease end we need to go to close. So I can select close, and then I can save it. In filter, we have already selected those two contacts. And we can go to input, and we can set down the end date. So end date, it doesn't have any financial impact. So I can select any, it's for your record, and I can save that. Once that is saved, we can generate the items. So this is generating. And once it's ready, we can go to the batch items. And here we can see the job status is ready for close. And I can run them. So the job status will change from running to done. And then we can go to the individual activation group to make sure the status is actually closed. So here we can see the contract phase is closed, activation group status is closed. Any question? Okay. Now let's move on to mass casualty. So again, we can select batch management and create batch. And I can select mass casualty from the drop down, and I can submit them. We can give it a name. Enter, and we can save it. And then we can go to action. And the mass casualty is already selected. So we can go to filters. And here again, we can select specific contracts or activation group, or we can have a larger group, for example, based on system, lease area, or even company code. And I can select specific items like, let's say, selecting activation group. And I can select, let's say, take this one. And confirm. And then I can go to input. I can select the payment date, let's say February 2024. And if you want to update the IPR, you can say that. And if you want to use the default casualty amount, we can check this box, or we can give a casualty amount over here. And then we can save it. We can generate it. And once it's generated, we can see the job status has changed to ready, and we can run them. So casualty will be applied to all the units they have in these activation group. So I can just say yes. If all the postings have been done up until February, up until the date I selected, the progress bar will turn green, and the status will be successful. So again, it has failed because I've not done the postings and it's not ready to be casualty. Any question? Do anyone have any comments? Okay. Now let's move on to mass lease modification. We can go to the main menu and we can select import export information. And here I can select mass lease modification. And then I can download the data file, or we can download an empty file, but it's better to download the file with the data of the contracts that you want to add the termination term. And I can select either mass agreement, contract, or bulk activation group. I'll select contract, and then I can select the different contracts from here that I want to add the new term, and then I can submit it. Once the file is ready to be downloaded, it will be shown over here. And I can click on this one and I can open the file. So here we have the details of the contract that were selected before. We can add the amendment date. Let's say I want the termination to be applied from June 2024 for all three contracts. And my recent code, to add a new term, it's 70. I can just select 70 and I can give it a description, add a new term. And if you want to change the contract rate, you can do so over here. 3%. And then once this tab is completed, we can go to the lease component modification. Here again, we have the details of the contracts that we have selected. We can add a new category. So 07 is for lease end. Deleting. So I'm selecting 07. And for term type, we have 92 as a termination option. So I can say 92. I can change the name to termination. Again, this is optional. And here I can give the termination, the penalty amount. It can either be 0, or if you have a penalty amount, you can put that. And we can give the payment date. When do you want the penalty, termination to be applied? So let's say 01, 06, 2024. Everything. And then we can move on to the next tab. So we have the non-lease distribution. If you have the non-lease amount, you can fill this up. Otherwise, this tab is not mandatory, so I can leave it as it. And then we can go to the activation group modification. Oops, I forgot something. We also have to give it a new term ID. So let's say term 1. Term 3. This should be unique. And I can copy this for activation group modification. Deleting the duplicate. And I can add the term object ID over here. Oops. And the name is termination. Again, these are optional. And it's likely to excise, and we can set down the date over here from when on the termination term should be applied. So let's say I want this to be applied from 1st January 2024. And I can select the posting date and document date too. Once these details are filled, we can go to the UI and we can upload the file. I can select mass lease modification and upload them.